The heat sat heavy on the town of Dry Creek, thick as old syrup and mean as a starved hound. It was the kind of heat that dried the sweat on your skin before it could drip, that turned wood to splinters and dirt to powder. Flies hummed around every corner, drawn to the scent of spilled beer, blood, and livestock waste. Overhead, the sky was a relentless white-blue glare, a sun hanging there like an unblinking, merciless eye. It was fair day, though fair was a generous word for it. Dusty tents pitched up along the main street hawked wilted vegetables, cheap cloth, and stale bread. A drunk fiddler scratched out something resembling a tune near the saloon, while children chased one another with sticks, their faces already burnt red from the sun. Men laughed too loud, women clutched their shawls tight, and everyone turned a blind eye to the ugliness unfolding in plain sight. Among the bustle moved a girl, barefoot, rail-thin, and streaked in grime. Eleanor Crow was a scrap of a thing, maybe 15 summers old if that. The kind of girl nobody claimed, nobody watched out for, and most forgot was even there. Hair like a bird's nest hung wild around her shoulders, tangled and streaked with sweat. Her face was drawn, hollow-cheeked, lips cracked from thirst. She kept low to the ground, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, looking for something, anything. A crust of bread, a fallen coin, a drop peach too bruised for a gentleman's mouth, but good enough for a stomach that hadn't known a full meal in weeks. She moved along the stalls like a stray cat, invisible until the wrong moment. The wrong moment came when she spotted it, an apple, half rotten, worm-pitted on one side, but red as blood on the other. It sat on a barrel beside a produce stand, forgotten while its owner haggled with a housewife over the price of onions. Ellie's fingers darted out, quick as a snake. "Gotcha, you little whore." The hand that closed around her wrist was fat, calloused, and stinking of sweat and liquor. Harlan Dake grinned down at her, teeth yellow and crooked beneath his thick mustache. Son of the biggest cattle baron this side of the Red Fork, Harlan was a man accustomed to taking what he wanted. And in Dry Creek, there wasn't a soul brave, or foolish, enough to tell him no. Ellie struggled, twisting like a cornered animal, but his grip was iron. "Thieving, are you?" Harlan slurred, lifting her off her feet with ease. The crowd nearby began to turn, eyes drawn by the commotion like flies to a fresh carcass. "Filthy little gutter rat, scuttlin' round my town like you belong here." I didn't," Ellie stammered, but it didn't matter. A backhanded slap cracked across her face, sharp enough to split the skin at the corner of her mouth. Blood tasted like copper pennies on her tongue. Somewhere in the blur of movement, Harlan seized the front of her thin, threadbare dress and tore it clean down the middle, exposing dirt-smeared skin and bony shoulders. The fabric hung loose, her shame laid bare for all to see. A jeer rose from the gathering crowd. "Look at the little thief now. Best haul her off to the sheriff." "Nah, let the boys have a little fun first." Harlan grinned, drunk on power and cheap whiskey. Without ceremony, he dragged Ellie toward the edge of the street, where the horses were tied, past steaming piles of dung and the dust-choked road. Her bare feet scraped over gravel and splinters, kicking up clouds of dry earth. "See this?" Harlan shouted to no one and everyone, shoving her down into a patch of muck and manure. "This is what happens to trash that don't know its place." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was cruel. The kind that pricks at the back of your neck, makes your stomach crawl. Flies swarmed as Ellie lay there in the stinking filth, the world spinning around her in a haze of heat, sweat, and humiliation. The stink of it coated her tongue, her hair matted to her face, and the sting of the slap throbbed with her heartbeat. And still no one moved. The sheriff leaned against a post outside the saloon, hat tipped low. The townsfolk watched from behind wagon wheels and tent flaps. A town full of folks, not a spine among them. Ellie's vision blurred. She tasted dirt and blood while rising in her throat. It had always been this way. No one ever came. Until he did. The blacksmith's forge sat at the far end of the street, squat and wide, its chimney belching dark smoke into the bright sky. Abel Kincaid was a broad, grizzled man, the kind who spoke little and kept to himself. He was the kind of man whose eyes had seen too many things to speak of, and whose hands had known both tenderness and killing. The town called him half-mad, a recluse with no kin, no wife, and no love for company. But when the girl screamed, Abel looked up from the anvil, and he moved. Through the heat haze he came, broad shoulders dark with sweat, leather apron spattered with soot. Every step heavy, measured, like a storm rolling in off the plains. The crowd parted without thinking. Harlan barely noticed until a shadow fell over him. He turned, still grinning, one hand tangled in Ellie's torn dress. "Well now, what's this? You come to put your name in for the girl, Smithy?" Abel said nothing, his gray eyes fixed on the girl in the dirt, then to the hand holding her. A beat of silence, thick as molasses, and then in a voice rough as gravel, deep as an iron kettle, Abel spoke. "She's my wife." The words hung there, heavy, improbable, shocking as thunder on a cloudless day. Harlan's grin faltered. Someone sucked in a breath. A mutter rippled through the crowd. "She's what?" Harlan sneered. Abel took another step, and something in his face, some dark, simmering promise of violence, made even Harlan Dake's bravado shrivel. "I said," Abel repeated, slower this time, voice like the grind of stone, "she's my wife." And for the first time all afternoon, Dry Creek fell still. Abel Kincaid had once known a different life. There were days, long ago, when the world had color, when dawn light softened the shape of his wife's face as she slept, her hair spilling across the pillow like spilled ink. Her name was Miriam, and she'd laughed with her whole body. The kind of laughter that made a man feel like the luckiest bastard alive just to hear it. Their boy, Tom, had hair like hers and eyes like his, sharp, gray, and always watching. They'd come west with hope in their pockets and blood in their boots, 2 wagons, a pair of draft horses, and 100 acres of nothing waiting to be tamed. Abel had built the forge with his own hands, stone by stone, hammering iron in the days and holding his wife in the nights. But the plains didn't care about hope, or laughter, or how many prayers a man whispered into the wind. The fever came first, a summer sickness that turned skin to fire and eyes to glass. Miriam burned for 3 days, clutched his hand so tight he thought his bones would break. Then she was gone. No priest, no grave marker, just a mound of earth beneath a lone pine and the memory of her voice echoing in an empty house. Tom had been 8 when the raiders came. Abel remembered the smell of smoke, the wild yells in a tongue he didn't know, the way the wind carried the scent of burning wood and flesh. He'd fought like a man possessed, hammer in hand, but by the time he reached the barn, it was too late. He'd buried his boy beside his mother under the same damn tree. After that, Abel spoke less and drank more. The town whispered that grief had twisted him, made him hard and strange. Folks stopped visiting the forge unless they had to. It suited him just fine. He didn't need people, didn't want them, or so he told himself. Until today, the present snapped back around him with the taste of dust and blood thick in the air. Harlan Dake's eyes flickered uncertainly, his grip on the girl loosening. Around them, the crowd held its collective breath. No one in Dry Creek wanted trouble with Abel Kincaid. There was something about him, not just his size, though he was a bear of a man, broad and barrel-chested. It was in his eyes, something hollow and dangerous. The sheriff stood at the edge of it all, leaning against a post, his badge tarnished and useless. He met Abel's gaze, held it for a beat, then looked away. "Let her go, Harlan," the sheriff muttered, not loud, not soft. For a long moment, nothing moved but the flies. Then Harlan shoved the girl down into the muck with a curse. "Ain't worth it," he spat, wiping his hands on his vest like she'd left a stain. Abel stepped forward, knelt, and gathered the girl up. She flinched, twisting away like a whipped dog, but his grip was gentle, careful. He could feel the tremble in her limbs. "She's mine now," Abel said to no one in particular, his voice a rough scrape of iron. And then, without another word, he carried her away. The forge was a low, stone building at the town's edge, its chimney smudging the sky with dark smoke. Inside it smelled of sweat, ash, and old sorrow. The walls were lined with tools, hammers, tongs, and saws, each in their proper place. An anvil sat in the center like an altar. The fire was still going, though the coals had dulled to a sullen red. Abel set the girl on a stool in the corner and fetched a basin of water, a clean rag. She shrank away, eyes darting for the door, gauging distance and danger. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, though his voice was rough as gravel, and it came out more command than comfort. She didn't believe him. He didn't expect her to. The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of the fire and the rasp of wind against the shutters. Abel worked methodically, tearing strips of clean cloth from an old shirt, dampening them, wiping the blood from her split lip, the grime from her cheek. She flinched every time he touched her, but didn't cry out. He could see the stubborn line of her jaw beneath the dirt. When he offered clean clothes, an old linen shift, patched but whole, she snatched them and huddled behind a hanging tarp to change. Abel waited, staring into the coals. He knew better than to ask questions. The ones that needed asking were the kind that left scars. Hours passed like that. No words, no demands. The rain started sometime after sundown, drumming steady against the roof. The storm came hard and fast, lightning splitting the sky, the wind howling through the gaps in the boards. Wolves sang to one another from the hills. Abel added wood to the fire, the glow painting his face in flickers of gold and shadow. The girl sat curled by the wall, eyes too big for her face, arms wrapped around her knees. He could see her thinking, weighing escape against warmth, fear against exhaustion. The battle was written plain as day in the tight set of her shoulders. "Got a name?" Abel asked, voice low, not looking at her. For a long time, nothing. Then, so soft he almost missed it, Ellie. He gave a single nod, more to himself than to her. It was a start. "Fire needs tending," he said, pointing to the bellows. "Show you how." She hesitated, but the promise of something, not kindness, not yet, but purpose, edged her onto her feet. Abel guided her hands to the bellows handle, his calloused fingers dwarfing hers. She flinched at first, then stilled. "Steady now," he murmured. She pumped, the flame brightening, licking higher. "Good." They worked in quiet, the storm outside a living thing. Little by little, Ellie's posture eased, the rigid knot of her body uncoiling. The door creaked open without warning, a shadow slipping in. Abel's hand went to a hammer. The man who entered was tall and lean, his face lined by wind and time, hair streaked with gray, a long scar cut through one brow, down to his cheek. He moved with the easy grace of a predator. A deerskin jacket hung from his shoulders, damp from rain. In one hand, he carried a bundle of rabbit pelts. "Hawk's shadow," Abel greeted. The tracker grunted a wordless reply, setting the pelts down. His sharp eyes flicked to Ellie, then back to Abel. "Trouble coming," Hawk said, voice like dry leaves. "Dake's boys. Drunk. Mean." Abel's jaw tightened. "Let 'em come." Hawk studied the girl a moment longer. In his world, the week didn't last. And yet something in her eyes. Not broken yet. Without another word, Hawk left a bone-handled knife on the table. "Rain'll cover your tracks till morning," he said, and was gone. The door swung shut, leaving only the storm, the fire, and the unlikely pair inside. Ellie looked at the knife, then at Abel. He met her gaze, tired but steady. "Best get some sleep, girl," he said. "Tomorrow's got teeth." For the first time, she didn't flinch. The storm still raged long after midnight, hammering Dry Creek with sheets of rain and sudden spears of lightning that split the black sky in crooked veins. Wind howled down the narrow alleys, rattling loose shutters and sending trash cartwheeling across the muddy street. In the forge, the fire burned low but steady, its flickering light painting restless shadows on the walls. Ellie lay curled on a pile of old sacks near the anvil, her thin shoulders rising and falling with each shallow breath. Sleep came in fits, haunted by half-remembered faces and the sting of humiliation. Now and again her eyes would flick open, finding Abel hunched at the workbench, shaping metal even in the dead of night, as if the clang of hammer and hiss of steam could beat back whatever hunted them. Neither of them spoke. The words felt unnecessary, like wasted breath, but something had shifted in the air between them. Some fragile thread spun in the firelight. Then a sound. Not the storm, not the restless groan of the forge. Bootsteps. Heavy, stumbling, too many at once. Abel's head snapped up. He set down his hammer, eyes narrowing. The hair on Ellie's neck prickled. Another crash. The front door kicked open, slamming against the wall. Harlan Dake's voice cut through the rain like a whip. "Thought you could hide her, you son of a bitch." Figures spilled into the forge, 5, maybe 6 of them, half drunk and soaked to the bone, the storm having smeared the grime on their faces into ugly masks. Pistols glinted in their fists. Clubs, knives. One of them, a man named Crenshaw, carried a rusted chain. The storm's light spilled through the doorway, rain hissing against hot iron. Abel didn't hesitate. His hand shot to the tongs by the forge, lifting a length of iron glowing cherry red. He swung it like a saber, the searing tip slicing the air. The first thug lunged. Steel met flesh. The hiss of burning skin was drowned by the man's shriek as the iron left a streak of scorched flesh across his face. He dropped his pistol, staggering back. "Get him!" Harlan howled. The others rushed in. Ellie scrambled under the workbench, heart pounding so hard it made her teeth ache. She clutched a rusted file, its jagged point trembling in her grip. The fight was brutal, close-quartered. Abel fought like a man built for war. A red-hot horseshoe slammed into another thug's throat. A hammer caved in a knee with a sickening crunch. Blood mixed with rain and ash, the forge smoke thickening with the coppery scent of it. But numbers told. A knife found Abel's side, a quick, ugly jab beneath the ribs. He grunted, blood blooming dark against his shirt. Still, he stayed on his feet, teeth bared, eyes alight with a savage fury. Then came a shape in the doorway. Silent as dusk, Hawk's shadow slipped in, soaked to the bone, his tomahawk gleaming wet in the flicker of firelight. No warning, no words. The blade buried itself in a man's skull with a dull crack. Another came at him with a club. Hawk sidestepped, caught the man's wrist, and drove a blade into his gut. A twist. A pull. The man crumpled. Abel met Hawk's eyes through the chaos, and in that brief, brutal moment, an unspoken brotherhood sealed itself. Ellie's terror crackled like a live wire inside her chest. She couldn't look away. One of the thugs, a rail-thin man with a knife, spotted her huddled under the bench. "There you are, you little." He lunged. Something inside Ellie snapped. Before she could think, she drove the broken file up into his thigh, deep enough to strike bone. His scream was high, panicked. He dropped the knife. She grabbed it, slashing blindly, catching his hand. Blood spray hot on her skin. She scrambled away as he toppled. The forge fire caught then, someone having knocked over a coal bin in the brawl. Flames licked at the wood, swallowing oil-streaked rags. Smoke billowed, thick and choking. "Abel!" Ellie screamed. The big man was flagging now, blood darkening his side, breathing ragged. Hawk saw it too. "Time to go." The tracker barked. Abel nodded, chest heaving. They didn't waste time. Abel grabbed Ellie's arm, dragging her toward the back door as Hawk lobbed a burning log into the remaining men's path, the flames flaring up, forcing them back. The smithy was a furnace behind them, the heat chasing them out into the storm. Gunfire cracked. A round missed Ellie's head by inches, splintering a fence post. They ran. The storm swallowed them whole, the town's lights fading behind like dying stars. Mud sucked at their boots, the rain blinding, but they didn't stop. Down the back trail, through the field beyond the churchyard, over a fence. A horse waited where Hawk had tied it earlier, a sturdy roan, already saddled. "Up," Hawk ordered. Ellie climbed up behind Abel without hesitation, her arms locking around his waist, feeling the wet heat of his blood. Hawk vaulted onto the horse's back, spurring it hard. They thundered into the dark, the town's shouts and flames shrinking behind them. Nobody spoke. The rain hid them, washed their scent, blurred their tracks. Ellie pressed her face against Abel's back, the world a blur of motion and pain and fire. Somewhere behind, Dry Creek burned. Ahead lay only wilderness, but it was better than what they left. And though the cold bit, though every step into the unknown meant new dangers, none of them slowed. They were alive. For now, that was enough. The rain never stopped. It poured in relentless sheets, turning the world to mud and mist, drowning out the sound of their footfalls and the thunder of their hearts. The trees loomed like dark, dripping skeletons, their limbs clawing at the sky. The wind howled through the ravines, cold enough to steal breath, cruel enough to cut through cloth and flesh alike. Ellie staggered through the mire, each step a battle. Her dress clung to her skin like a second, sodden hide. The raw scrape of her feet on jagged stone, the ceaseless ache in her legs, none of it mattered. Not now. Not with the memory of Dry Creek's fire still burning in her mind, the scent of smoke and blood thick in her nostrils. Ahead, Abel moved like a wounded bear, broad shoulders hunched against the storm, one hand pressed tight to his side. His blood stained the earth behind him, thin and dark in the rain, leaving a trail any half-blind fool could follow. Beside him, Hawk's shadow led the way, his presence as constant as the rain, wordless and certain. He moved through the wilderness like a ghost, seeming to know where the earth gave way, where roots hid beneath the water. His tomahawk hung loose at his side, eyes always watching. They climbed, slipping over moss-slick rocks, scrambling through underbrush that clawed at their flesh. Once, a branch snapped under Abel's weight, and he dropped to a knee with a low growl. Ellie reached for him without thinking, her small hand steadying his arm. "I can walk," he muttered. She didn't let go. Night swallowed the forest early, the storm bringing down a blackness so deep it seemed to press against the skin. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled, their voices weaving through the storm, hunting cries sharpened by hunger. By the time they found shelter, a shallow overhang of stone half hidden by a thicket of wet ferns, they were shaking with cold. Hawk built a fire, coaxing a weak flame from damp kindling with a skill Ellie couldn't comprehend. The light flickered in the hollow space, pushing back the dark just enough to show how ragged they'd become. Abel slumped against the rock wall, his face pale beneath the soot and grime. The wound at his side wept blood. Fever glazed his eyes, and though he stayed upright by sheer will, Ellie could see the tremor in his fingers. "Will he die?" she asked Hawk, voice small in the storm. The tracker crouched by the fire, grinding leaves and bark into a paste. He didn't answer for a long while. "Maybe," he said finally, and passed her a scrap of cloth. "Hold this against the cut." She did as told, wincing at the heat of his skin. "Keep him awake," Hawk said, "or fever'll take him." The tracker vanished into the night then, leaving them alone in the flicker of firelight, the storm a living thing just beyond reach. Ellie sat beside Abel, pressing the poultice to his wound, watching sweat bead along his brow. His breathing was ragged, too shallow. She remembered the smell of sickness, how it clung to her mother's bed before the cholera took them all. Her father had lasted 3 days after, his eyes yellow, skin like paper. She'd been 8 when the neighbors found her in the empty house, starving, half-mad, sold to a traveling showman not long after. 6 years of cages, sharp slaps, and rough hands. Now here she was again, waiting for someone else to die. But this time, something in her rebelled against it. As the night dragged on, Abel muttered in his fever, names she didn't know. A woman's name. A boy's. His voice broke, a raw edge of grief. Ellie watched him thrash, sweat slick and shivering. She remembered a lullaby then, one her mother used to hum. A soft, sad thing. Words lost to time, but melody sharp in memory. Without thinking, Ellie began to hum it. The sound was rough, uncertain at first, but the notes found themselves, a fragile thread of warmth in the cold. Abel's breath eased. His trembling slowed. For the first time in days, Ellie felt something inside her settle. Not safety. Not quite, but something close enough to it. By the time Hawk returned, the storm easing to a drizzle, Abel was asleep, the fever not yet broken, but not claiming him either. "You did good," Hawk said, crouching by the fire, offering her a strip of dried meat, strong for a little bird. She took the meat, chewing slowly. The salt stung her cracked lips. "My name's Ellie," she said. The tracker grunted. "To me, you look more like Little Crow." Ellie blinked, unsure if it was a kindness or a mockery, but it didn't feel cruel. The days that followed blurred into one another. They crossed rivers swollen with rain, the current near pulling them under. Hawk showed her how to find the narrowest point, where the rocks bit shallow, how to brace against the flow. Abel, though weakened, still moved ahead, a silent force driven by something Ellie couldn't name. She learned to build snares, simple loops of wire and twine to catch rabbits. Hawk showed her how to read tracks in the mud, the splay of toes, the depth of a print betraying the weight of a creature. She learned what plants soothed hunger, which left a man raving and broken. The wilderness was vast, cruel, and beautiful. Mist clung to the cliffs in the mornings, and at night, the sky bled stars in clearings untouched by fire. Abel spoke little, but when he did, his words mattered. "You hold a knife like this," he instructed one evening, showing her how to grip the hilt. "Anything bigger than you. Aim for the throat, the eyes." He let her patch his wound without flinching, though the infection lingered. Hawk left fresh poultices made from cedar bark and wild mint. One evening by the fire, with the wolves howling beyond the trees, Ellie told them her story. "Cholera took my folks. Left me. Neighbors sold me to a showman, said it was kinder than starvation. Spent 6 years in a cage. Taught me to beg, to steal. Ran when he got drunk and killed a boy over a rigged dice game." Abel didn't offer pity. Hawk didn't turn away. Abel spoke of his own then, of Miriam, of Tom. "I buried them both under a pine tree I planted," he said. "Ground's probably swallowed the stone by now." It wasn't a confession, more like a reckoning, and somehow it felt like a thread binding them tighter. That night, the wolves came too close. Ellie woke to the soft crackle of twigs, the glow of eyes in the dark. One, larger than the rest, padded into the fire's edge. A great gray beast, its ribs sharp beneath its fur. Her hands trembled as she gripped the knife Abel had given her. It lunged. Ellie moved without thinking, sidestepping, driving the blade into its neck. Hot blood spilled across her hand. The wolf buckled, its weight dragging her down, but she held on, teeth bared, not stopping until it lay still. When it was done, she sat shaking, blood staining her shift. Abel hauled the carcass away. Hawk grunted approval. "Little Crow," Hawk said. "Name fits." And for the first time, Ellie smiled. Dawn bled into the sky, a thin red line behind the black silhouette of the cliffs. Mist clung low to the canyon floor, curling around jagged rocks like ghostly fingers. The air smelled of wet earth and blood, the storm long since spent but leaving behind a world stripped clean, raw and waiting. Abel crouched near a jagged stone ledge, sweat shining on his face despite the cold. His side throbbed where the wound hadn't healed clean. Every heartbeat a dull hammer blow under the skin. He gripped the old forge hammer in one hand, its head scarred, handle worn smooth by years of work and war. In his other, he held a length of rope. The final trigger for a deadfall trap hung precariously above the canyon mouth. Hawk's shadow moved like a whisper, a phantom among the rocks, setting snares of sharpened stakes and balanced boulders. His face was painted in mud and ash, a wolf's tooth around his neck. They spoke little. There wasn't anything left worth saying. Ellie knelt atop a crumbling outcrop, a battered musket cradled in her arms. The stock was too big for her thin frame, but she held it steady, her jaw set. Her hair hung in dark, tangled strands, but her eyes, sharp, defiant, missed nothing. In the distance, hoofbeats. "They're here," Hawk murmured. Through the mist came Harlan Dake and a half-dozen men, rifles glinting, faces hard with drink and hatred. Harlan rode ahead, grinning beneath that filthy mustache, a pistol resting across his thigh. "Thought you could crawl into the hills and vanish, Smithy," he called. His voice echoed against the stone walls. "Dragged my name through the dirt. Stole my property. I'm going to take her back, carve her up like a fat hog, and string your guts across this canyon." Abel's fingers tightened on the hammer. Harlan laughed. "And you?" He pointed at Ellie's perch. "I'm going to let my boys break you good this time. No one rides out of here but us." Ellie didn't flinch, didn't blink. Hawk gave a sharp, low whistle. A signal. The first trap fell. A stack of loose stones thundered down from the canyon wall, crushing one of Harlan's men before he could even scream. The others cursed, scattering. Gunfire cracked through the mist. Abel swung his hammer in a wide arc, shattering the skull of a man lunging toward him with a Bowie knife. Hawk's tomahawk flew from his hand, embedding itself in another's chest. The world narrowed to smoke, blood, and the sharp ring of lead. Ellie's finger curled around the trigger as a thug crept toward Hawk, dagger raised. The musket's kick nearly tore her shoulder, but the shot caught the man in the neck, spinning him down into the dust. Abel charged through the chaos, ducking behind a boulder as bullets chewed the air. The hammer felt alive in his grip, not a tool now, but a weapon, an extension of his grief and fury. Harlan stepped clear of his men, lifting his pistol. "Come on then, Blacksmith," he bellowed. "Let's finish this right." Abel straightened. Blood leaked from his side. His clothes hung in tatters, but his eyes, those gray, storm-burned eyes, never left Harlan's face. "No guns," Abel growled. "Hammer in hands." A dark grin cut across Harlan's face. He tossed his pistol aside. "Ain't no man ever took me like that." "You're no man," Abel said. "You're a disease." They circled each other in the dust, the canyon walls holding their breath. Harlan lunged first, fist swinging. Abel caught it with his free hand, driving his forehead into the other man's nose with a sickening crunch. Harlan staggered, blood spraying. The hammer arced up, catching Harlan's forearm, bone splintering. He howled, wild with pain, scrabbling for a rock. But Abel didn't wait. With a final surge of battered strength, he spun the hammer overhand and hurled it. It struck Harlan square in the chest with a crack like a breaking bone. The man lifted off his feet, slammed against a rock, and slid down lifeless, eyes wide and glassy. Silence swallowed the canyon. The few remaining men, bloodied and shaken, turned tail and ran into the mist, leaving their dead behind. Abel dropped to one knee, breath ragged. Blood trickled from his side, thick and dark. Ellie rushed to him, dropping the musket, hands trembling as she pressed cloth to the wound. "You're free now," Abel rasped. "No more running." She shook her head hard, tears spilling. "I ain't leaving you." Their eyes met, the broken, the lost, the ones the world spat out. And in that silence, words weren't needed. Hawk appeared beside them, his face unreadable. In his hand, he held a single dark feather, long and glossy. Without a word, he tucked it into Ellie's tangled hair, a mark of belonging. "Little Crow," he said softly, "you earned your name." Ellie straightened, her face fierce, the world's weight no longer crushing but carried. They made no graves for the dead, no stones, no prayers. The rain would claim them, and the earth would forget. By noon, they rode out, Hawk leading, Abel upright only by stubborn will, Ellie close beside him, the feather dancing in her hair with every step. Ahead, the mountains rose, sharp and endless, wrapped in mist. Behind them, Dry Creek was little more than a smudge on the horizon. They didn't look back. Some names vanish in dust, others burn like iron in flame, and in that fire we are forged.